Over 2 decades, human attention spans dropped nearly 70%, bottoming out at roughly 8 seconds. That tiny window contrasts sharply with our consumption. Adults globally spend over 4 hours every day on social media. This constant consumption of high-speed, effortless content has earned a specific name: brain rot. It describes the profound cognitive dulling that occurs when the mind is fed a relentless diet of stimulation that requires no effort to process and leaves no lasting memory. If you find yourself unable to read a full article without reaching for your phone, it's easy to blame a lack of discipline. But this shift in focus is a predictable outcome of how these digital environments are engineered. The decline is a direct result of how these systems interact with your biology. The human brain constantly rewires itself based on the signals it receives. This is neuroplasticity. Binging short clips targets the prefrontal cortex, the center for impulse control. Conditioned for instant novelty, this region's capacity for sustained focus physically weakens. As the brain's threshold for constant stimulation steadily rises, ordinary, everyday life begins to feel unbearably slow and uninteresting. A quiet conversation or a walk without a podcast starts to feel agonizingly dull because the baseline dopamine reward simply isn't high enough to register anymore. We also see the Google effect in action. By relying on devices to store every fact, we reduce our brain's need to maintain its recall capacity, leading to a measurable decline in memory. Every hour spent in the scroll is a session in physical brain sculpting. You are training your neural pathways to crave constant shifts in topic and reject any task requiring deep, prolonged effort. To understand why your brain is being rewired, you have to look at the tools being used to do it. Tech companies spend billions perfecting designs intended to maximize the time you spend on their platforms. Every action is a signal. A pause, a replay, or a swipe are harvested as data points. Platforms use this data to build a map of your psychological triggers, learning which imagery and pacing keeps you engaged, often recognizing your patterns before you do. The feed then uses this profile to deliver a sequence of content calibrated for maximum impact. This creates a cycle of dopamine spikes, making the act of putting the phone down feel like an interruption to your internal reward system. Platform personalization serves a specific function. It transforms your attention into a resource for the platform to track and monetize. In this exchange, your focus is the commodity being mined. The users aren't the only ones affected by these incentives. Content creators are also forced to adapt to the algorithm's demand for absolute retention. Nuance and depth are difficult to maintain when the system rewards speed. This financially pressures creators to produce louder, shorter, and more aggressive content simply to remain visible in an overcrowded feed. This creates a cycle where content becomes increasingly high velocity, competing for a shrinking attention span. Over time, this pressure strips depth and nuance out of the digital media ecosystem. We are left with an environment that prioritizes immediate engagement over cognitive health, turning the digital world into a constant race for the next few seconds of your time. Because the brain remains plastic, the same biological pathways that adapted to distraction can be retrained for sustained attention. Recovery is possible through a series of deliberate changes to your environment. The most effective tool you have is friction. To break the habit of scrolling, you must make the act of picking up the phone physically difficult. Increasing the effort required to reach the device decreases the frequency of the habit. You can also remove the visual hooks. Switching your phone to grayscale mode eliminates the saturated colors that trigger dopamine responses. Without that visual stimulation, the screen becomes a tool rather than an addictive toy. Rebuilding focus requires progressive overload. Treat your attention like a muscle that has atrophied. Start with small, timed intervals of deep work or reading, and gradually increase the duration as your endurance returns. Reclaiming your mind is about engineering your surroundings. By making distraction difficult and focus the path of least resistance, you give your brain the space it needs to heal. This recovery can begin with a structured 7-day protocol designed to reset your baseline. Days 1 and 2 focus on the visual triggers. Switch every device to grayscale and turn off all non-human notifications to stop the phone from demanding your attention. On days 3 and 4, introduce physical friction. Keep your phone in a separate room while you work and replace your morning scroll with a low-stimulation activity like journaling or walking. Days 5 and 6 focus on endurance. Set aside 1 hour for total device-free boredom to allow your mind to wander and engage in a physical hobby that requires your full presence. By day 7, the goal is intentionality. You only open an application if you can state a specific reason for doing so, moving from a reactive habit to a conscious choice. The human mind was built for depth. By choosing to step out of the cycle of constant stimulation, you aren't just fixing your focus, you are taking back your autonomy.